So why don't we start with you, Joy? Talk about what year did you start at Grand Valley, and what made you decide to go to college there?
That's actually a pretty interesting question. I started at Grand Valley in 2006. I applied to almost all of the Michigan universities except Northern and U of M. And I chose Grand Valley because they gave me the best scholarship package, considering that my family is very low income. Went to the inner city schools of Creston, first person in my family to go to college. So that was the most important factor for me, was not the program or how successful the school was, the reputation, but rather how much money they were willing to give me, basically.
And how about you, Ben?
I went to Grand Valley in 2006 as well. It was actually the only school I applied for. I don't know why I particularly chose it. It was far away from my family. I wasn't out yet. I wasn't entirely comfortable for myself. So I knew it was a place where I could develop without fear of my hometown and influences that I grew up with.
Okay. And what's been both of your experiences at Grand Valley, as people who are part of the LGBTQ community in terms of, the other students, faculty and staff, any particular organizations you've been a part of? So maybe just speak to a little bit of your personal experience over the last 4 or 5 years on campus.
Well, when I first got to Grand Valley, it was quite a culture change for me because I went, like I said, to a low-income, predominantly black school in Grand Rapids. I grew up with all black neighbors. So coming to Grand Valley and having it be all white people felt like a really bad Gap commercial, and I really didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to act or behave, and then, I didn't really understand the culture there. So that was a huge adjustment for me. And I actually didn't come out until my sophomore year of college. And for the most part, I would say that my experience as an LGBT student at Grand Valley has been a very empowering one and very supportive one. But I have run into instances of bias, like walking down the hall and being called a dyke, and people giving me dirty stares when I'm holding a girlfriend's hand or something like that. But I feel like it's empowering because I feel like I have enough confidence to be able to not allow something like that to bother me. Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely. How about you, Ben?
For me, it was a culture shock as well. I grew up in a small town, but I actually lived out in the country. We had basically no neighbors. So coming to campus and basically experiencing what I felt is suburban life, because the majority of the people in my hall and those around me grew up in pretty affluent suburbs, and I had no experience of this. And as far as being an LGBT individual, I was scared to come out. I can't think of a word. Okay. So I was scared to come out, but my fears were unnecessary. After coming out to my close friends and the community around me, I got an overall positive response, which I was not expecting based on the environment that I grew up in before. I was very well surprised. And as being an LGBT student, I got involved with the LGBT Center. It helped me feel more empowered with myself and who I am, and it helped me develop in the person that I am today.
Joe, you mentioned that there have been some instances where people have, made negative comments towards you, or maybe treated you, discriminated in some fashion because of how you identify. How have you been able to kind of respond to that, negative reaction from people? And then secondly, how do you think both the policies of the university have either helped or hindered in trying to kind of support your desire to be treated as an equal?
Well, with the dyke thing that I mentioned, like walking down the hallway, and because of the way I express my gender, a lot of people, that's like their first impression. That's what they see, and it's a stereotype, a walking stereotype. So in that situation, I actually just like went up to the girl and I just like sat down next to her, and I was like, "Why did you think it was okay to say that to me?" And I mean, most people I know would not have done that, but for me, like, I was confronting it. Like, I felt confident enough to know that, like, I wanted her to make sure that it's not okay to say that. Like, it's hurtful, it's mean, and like it's unnecessary. And she was taken aback by it, and by the end of the conversation, she was like apologizing over and over and over again. So that's how I usually handle it. But if it's just like dirty stares and stuff, I just kind of like let it go, because it's not really my problem, it's theirs if they're going to be hateful. And in terms of the policies of the university, I would say that they're pretty progressive in terms of the fact that, like, I mean, we do have in our non-discrimination clause that like gender identity and expression are both like protected in there, and sexual orientation. And that's especially important for me, considering that I'm both queer and genderqueer. And I mean, like, that's a very interesting perspective to be those like marginalized identities, not just like in terms of just being queer, but like, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to most people. You know what I mean? And I think that one thing that probably could improve with the policies is that I think that professors, faculty, and staff should have to undergo some kind of sensitivity training, ally training, because some things in class, some language that's used is definitely wrong, is derogatory, and like when I have confronted professors about it, like in the nicest way possible, most of the time, like they tend to like kind of just blow it off. You know what I mean? Like they say transgendered in class, and then I say, well, actually it's transgender, and then like, or they'll say something like Berdashi, and like, just offensive terms like that, and they should know better. Like, I know that their heart, they're like well-intentioned or whatever, but I mean, you have to take it one step further. Like, you don't know who's in that classroom when you're using those kinds of words. You don't know the gender identity of the person sitting there. Like, don't assume. And we need to be teaching our faculty and staff that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Ben? I mean, have you encountered any, sort of negative or, sort of discriminatory practices from students or faculty, since you've kind of come out on campus? And then how would you sort of rate the university's policies in terms of being supportive of your desire to be treated as an equal?
I have run into some instances. I thankfully had nothing major. Holding hands with my boyfriend through campus, giving him a kiss goodbye. I'll notice stares from like across the room or whatever, and I just ignore it. As Joy said, I feel it's more of their problem than my problem. I don't need to go and explain to them what is going on and what they're doing is wrong. But I feel that me making a presence and not being shy about holding hands with my partner, or giving him a kiss goodbye, or showing any signs of affection. As far as the university policy is overall, I'm happy about it, and the fact that it is accepting of different sexualities, gender identities, and expressions. But as far as everything underneath the overall umbrella, that still needs to be looked at. As far as concerns of students in housing, some students don't feel comfortable living with someone of the same sex or gender. They feel more comfortable with someone else, or they just want to live with their best friend, and these things can't be done. Or things such as the locker room. If you're a trans student, are you going to be outed if you go to the locker room? And a bunch of other policies such as that need to be looked at. GVSU does say they're affirming and welcoming of all different backgrounds, but they still have to prove it in some aspects.
Okay. Joe, you wanted to follow?
Yeah, actually, that was one glaring thing that I totally overlooked. As a gender variant student, university policy kind of just ignores us like we don't exist. Every form it says male and female, and they often confuse sex and gender too on the form, and that's just really alienating. It's like there's no space for us. There's no space carved out for us on any forms in any department, and like even if you do tell your professor, I prefer these pronouns, like do they always listen? No, definitely. Especially as a gender variant student, and more specifically, like with the transgender population, like, for instance, let's take this. When you go to the registry, when you you want to change your name, you have to provide a legal document, like signifying that you've gone through the name change, a legal name change. And not every trans student has the ability or the access to do that. Not every trans student can do that. It's not feasible for them, right? And so it goes on the record, their name that they do not prefer, like their signed birth name or whatever, and that carries them to Banner, it carries them to Blackboard, it carries them into classes, and so professors are reading the roll call, and and they go down and they say Caitlin, and then the student comes up to the professor afterwards and says, actually, I prefer the name Caden, you know what I mean? And I prefer the pronouns he. I'm actually a F to M student, and I'm currently transitioning. And the professor, it's up to the professor then to acknowledge that, and that's not okay. And so I think that university policy is definitely lacking in terms of addressing transgender and gender variant needs. And I think that we do have a ways to go in terms of that. So.
Okay. Now, so speaking of policy, both of you have been involved in a campaign on campus to get gender-neutral housing. So let's talk about that a little bit. But maybe for people who are not aware of what that is, can you maybe explain to people who will see this, what does it mean to organize for gender-neutral housing?
Sure. The way that the current housing selection process goes or whatever is that they allow students to self-report their gender, and then they do it based on same gender assignments. And so that means two self-identified females living together and two self-identified males living together. Gender-neutral housing, as opposed, conversely, is where gender is irrelevant when it comes to selecting a roommate. Maybe it's not the most important factor, or perhaps it's just irrelevant. It doesn't matter. So you could be an F to M student living with a straight male, straight female, cis person, or you could be a cis female living with a cis male. It doesn't matter. Gender is irrelevant. Does that make sense?
Sure. And what's the argument that you all are making about why that's important that gender-neutral housing be implemented on campus? What are some of the arguments you give?
One of the arguments is that it promotes freedom of choice. Students should be empowered to choose who they live with. It shouldn't be up to the university to dictate that, you have to live with only males, you have to live with only females, and that removes anyone who's in between or other or doesn't want to live with males or doesn't want to live with females.
Yeah, and it's like I was saying earlier, it's more inclusive of gender variant and transgender population. Because as it stands now, if you're F to M student and you are on record as a female student and you want to live with a cis male, if you self-report as female on your form or whatever, you can't do it. And it's really alienating for, the needs of the trans population, I would say.
Yeah.
And I would also argue that gender-neutral housing promotes gender equality because oftentimes we have this ridiculous notion that men and women can't live together peacefully. And we know that not to be true because we see so many functional examples of it all the time. And often people assume that when this happens, there's always a sexual relationship involved, which is really a heterosexist idea, considering that if Ben and I live together, there's not going to be any sex going on,
No.
No, we're just friends. And you're probably a lot cleaner than I am. I mean, because there's like this stereotype, you know,
Sure,
that
sure.
like,
Yeah,
That's also a stereotype
Yes.
that gay men are cleaner.
Right.
yes. Yes. Exactly. So it breaks down stereotypes. So like, instead of having it being messy straight men, clean gay men, clean straight women, you know, those ridiculous stereotypes, like people start realizing that there's instead clean and messy people. And then this what takes away the gender.
I would also say that it supports safety. Students should be able to feel safe in their home. And when they come to their home and they're faced with homophobic or transphobic remarks, that's not really acceptable. Students such as Tyler Clementi from Rutgers, he had a homophobic roommate and it led to his suicide, sadly. And Rutgers saw this as a problem and they instilled gender-neutral housing on their campus. And we hope that Grand Valley would do the same to promote equality and equity for all of its students.
Yeah, especially since as we have been doing this campaign, we've been like listening to people's stories of like when they first get to Grand Valley and they're blindly assigned to someone and the situation is horrendous. Like they do have to deal with a homophobic or transphobic roommate, and if they try to like get rid of like intervene the situation by moving in with a family member of a differing gender, like housing's like, no, it's against our policy, even though that's like a safer environment for them. Like it doesn't make any sense at all. That we've seen that. We've also seen like gay male students who would like to live with like their lesbian or cis straight females friends, but they can't, even though these people are their allies. And like that would foster a much more like inclusive and like safe, comfortable environment. Like housing can't do it because it's against the gender segregated policy, basically.
What's been the reaction so far of the student body to this organizing campaign? What kind of support or opposition have you experienced so far?
The student body has been overwhelmingly accepting. Their biggest concern is that it's mandatory, and we try to explain that gender-neutral housing is an option that you opt into. It's something for those students who feel more comfortable living with someone maybe of a different gender, or maybe their best friend is a female and they're a male, and they just would be happier living together because they know they're compatible. Those are some of the biggest ones, and I guess cohabitation with sexual relationships, that has been a concern, but most students know that's not a reality. There's a lot of people who live off of campus with mixed genders, and that is not a problem. It's quite prevalent so I know as far as my friends, and I know as far as yours, I live with someone of a differing gender. My best friend, she's a female, Jessie. No one is shocked when I tell them that I live with a female. It's not some revolutionary idea, so I don't see why it would be on campus. Given you?
I would say that when we first started the campaign, there was a lot of misinformation about it. It was kind of spun and like, this is for purely like trans students. And so we had like to do an education campaign to basically like talk to students directly to say, no, it's not mandatory. No, it doesn't invite a sexual relationship. And no, it's not just for trans students. It's for anyone who feels like this, who seeks this option because they feel like it would be more comfortable because they want to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And then what's been the reaction so far from the administration about the campaign in terms of what you're trying to achieve?
They had some similar concerns, but on top of that, we had this notion that case-by-case basis is good enough. The fact that students feel comfortable approaching housing when they themselves may not feel comfortable in their identities, or they may not be able to express their needs fully, or the fact that you have to go out in search of something when it should just be an option there right in front of your face. For some reason, they feel like case by case is good enough. That has been a big reaction.
Should we explain what case by case is?
Yeah, do you want to explain that?
No, you can explain it.
Case by case would have each student have to approach the housing one-on-one to kind of decide if they're allowed to have gender-neutral housing, if they're allowed to live with someone who they want to. This says that the person that they're working with in housing is not homophobic. Housing has been a great ally in some regards with the trans and the gay and lesbian and bi community. But you don't know who you're working with. You don't know what personal beliefs the person may have. You don't know what biases they have that may hinder or inhibit someone from having this option. Is there anything else you need to do?
And this is, you mentioned Rutgers earlier, what the incident on campus there, and that led to them getting a gender neutral housing policy. This is really kind of part of a larger national movement that what you're engaged in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, like when we first started, there was only like 50 universities across the U.S. that had implemented gender neutral housing, and now there's 74. Like it's a growing. Universities are recognizing the need for it and realizing that the gender segregated system is outdated and it's not inclusive, and so they are switching over. But I mean, we have a vision of what gender neutral housing looks like on Grand Valley because we have done the research. We're students. We have that perspective. We understand, like, we talk to the students who want this option, and like we have developed our policy for this, and so we're adamant about getting our policy implemented instead of like this case by case nonsense.
I know that when we went to Mumble Tech, I can't remember all the, Midwest?
Bisexual,
lesbian, gay, trans, college, conference, hopefully allies.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's a Midwest conference for LGBT college students to get together and communicate and kind of discuss ideas of what's going on their campus and see what they can do. When we attended, we found out that every school we talked to has a campaign to work towards gender neutral housing. I was quite taken back that every school. I mean, we're not alone. This is something that's going on not only all over in the state of Michigan, but across the United States.
Yeah, and they're also working towards gender neutral bathrooms too, which is, I feel, a right step direction. You know what I mean?
I'm just curious, as you've been involved in this organizing campaign to get this policy changed on campus, which obviously the goal in of itself is an important thing because it'll provide very concrete solution to give people more freedoms, more choices, feel safer, all those kinds of things. But do you think also that sort of the kind of the daily grind work of the organizing campaign also has benefits beyond just the goal of getting it, in that it provides another mechanism for people to have these important conversations, to kind of confront both students and faculty and administrative people about, how these issues are important, particularly to the LGBT community, but that it's not enough to just, kind of give us simple kinds of, acknowledgments, but that this is a much more complex, longer term kind of struggle that you're a part of.
Okay. I think this definitely brings to the front the needs of the trans community, which has been ostracized, not talked about, acted like it's not even there. So to have things talked about, like gender neutral housing, and then you say the trans community needs this in specific, the questions start to arise: what is the trans community? What are their needs? How are they have unique needs? How are they similar to the rest of us? And it also connects the dots with things like, oh, they need like safe bathrooms, safe locker rooms.
Safe athletic department. Something as simple as using the swimming pool can be quite a challenge for a trans student. So I guess demystifies the trans community and their needs, because they have been left out for so many years, not just by mainstream society, but also by the lesbian and gay, bisexual community as well.
See that the effort so far to date has been a galvanizing force for the LGBTQ student body, or even for allies, as something not only concrete to work on, but that it has maybe solidified or matured relationships with people.
Yeah,
I feel like it is definitely allowed students to feel like they have a voice. Students feel that there's something that they are passionate about and they're working hard towards, and that we are actually making a difference. It makes students feel like they matter. We can unite and stand up for things that are like just, things that we should have.
Okay. A couple sort of, maybe these are more history kinds of questions in a sense, but in talking to other people who were maybe on campus either as students or faculty beginning in the 70s, and listening to the sort of the change that have taken place. I mean, can you even kind of imagine, coming to Grand Valley as a campus and there being no policy, no LGBT resource center, that to be out would be potentially even dangerous or harmful to your own, safety and well-being. I mean, how important do you think, or how aware do you think that your peers are about how, even in such a short period of time, there's been a significant transformation in terms of campus culture around LGBT issues?
I mean, we have been there since 2006. So, I mean, I've noticed significant changes since then. Like, for instance, establishing the LGBT Resource Center. I feel like domestic partner benefits happened right before I got there. No? Okay. Okay. I lied. Oh. And then, I mean, like when I first got there, the only student organization that was LGBT related was Out and About, and there was no trans group, there was no like students of color, like a queers of color group, and now there's 5 organizations, and one of the key ones is Trans Spectrum, and they're also some of the strongest key like student leaders. They host a lot of events, do a lot of education, community development, like. They're serious business, and I don't know. It's just really interesting to see like how Grand Valley was kind of like, when I first got there, people were like, "Ooh, don't come out, don't be out, don't do it because you'll get spit on," like because that happened. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I remember when that happened, and I was like, "Oh my God, this place is gonna be intense." But now I feel like the campus culture has changed significantly. Like, it's no longer really a taboo thing. Most people understand what LGBT means. Like, I'm really so familiar with it. And, like, I don't know. There's a lot of opportunities for LGBT students to utilize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen it change drastically, too. Part of it, I feel like, is growing up, being exposed to all these things. Being exposed to LGBT students at Grand Valley after 1, 2, 3, 4 years, it has an effect on a person. They're more accepting, welcoming. It's not a scary, taboo thing that is not talked about. As far as the history, like I said, I'm not too familiar with local history. I know as far as housing is concerned, it was taboo to have mixed gender floors. To say that there's 2 males that have a room right here, and then 2 females right next to them.
Was out of the question.
Yeah, And now it's just, okay, that's just normal. Most people don't give it a second thought. I feel as though gender neutral housing will go the same way. Oh, you live with a male and you have a female as well. I think in 10 years, it's gonna be, why wasn't this always there?
Yeah. I guess what I was trying to say is I just feel like as a student, as a activist, I feel like the Grand Valley community has grown tremendously. It's much more safer and inclusive now than it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. There's a lot more opportunities, and visibility is a very good word. I like that word. Yeah, I would agree with you, actually. I mean, I know some of the local history of Grand Rapids when it comes to like the queer community and of Grand Valley because of Milt Ford. And I mean, like, obviously I don't really understand what his experience was like. Like, I didn't have to go through those things, but like, I mean, there's still quite the struggle ahead of us. We're nowhere near close being equal.
Yeah.
Like, we still don't even have basic rights. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. I recently finished Vicki Eckler's book called Queer America, which is sort of the LGBT people's history.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that she identifies as sort of a source of ongoing tension, particularly in the last 30 to 40 years, but it definitely since Stonewall happened, is there's been sort of a tension between folks in the LGBT community who are kind of more interested in kind of an assimilationist goal, and then folks who are maybe who have been reclaiming the idea of queer identity and are much more interested in liberation as sort of an outcome of their organizing. So I'm sort of wondering what you both think about that kind of dynamic that exists, because it certainly exists in this community as well.
Oh, yes, it does. I'm quite familiar with it. As someone that has, because like I'm not a lesbian, you know, I'm not a lesbian, and I don't like it when that term is used on me. I don't like it. I identify as a queer person, and like oftentimes it goes right over people's heads. And so obviously, like, I'm not an assimilationist, like, not at all. I'm not. I understand the perspective because usually it's like, what's the word, anchored in like cultural, like a cultural, like historical difference between my generation and theirs. Most times I find that it's with the older lesbian and gay community where they don't really understand queer. They don't understand anything that doesn't fit into like, I don't know, like a heteronormative kind of box. That's the only way I can kind of like understand it. Yeah. I mean, like, for me, I am a total liberationist. Like, this is an interesting question for me. I think you should go.
I don't know. For me, I guess personally, I don't really see myself as an assimilationist. Being gay, I feel like, has liberated me to break down gender stereotypes, the idea of femininity and masculinity. I can develop who I feel like I am and how I want to be without as much influences on the heteronormative culture. I can do things that are effeminate, I can do things that are masculine, and it's just who I am. I don't have to worry about, does this mean that people think I'm straight? Does this mean people think that I'm gay? No, I feel like there's happiness in that freedom and being able to express myself, which in some regards, I feel a little bad for those straight people out there. They don't always have that freedom. I know that my best friend is a straight male. I don't question this. He's more of like sensitive, he's effeminate, and he'll get pegged as gay, which shouldn't really be an issue, but why do you need to judge someone's sexuality based on their mannerisms and how they express themselves?
Mm-hmm. People often like to conflate sexuality and gender a whole lot. It's really interesting how that happens, how the way that we understand sexuality, the way we understand gender is kind of, I'm not a fan of it. Let's just say that I'm just not a fan of it. So like I really don't, I don't know. For instance, let's put it this way. For me, a point of contention with me and an assimilationist perspective is that I'm very critical of marriage equality because the way that it's framed, the way that it's been mobilized and organized for is to allow persons of the same sex, whatever that means, to marry. And that still privileges monogamy over polyamory. It still doesn't, like, where are those 1,000+ benefits going to asexuals, people who prefer not to enter a monogamous union? Like, do they not deserve the same rights, benefits, and privileges? So, like, I feel like we should be asking ourselves these questions. And oftentimes the simulationists don't. They want, the white picket fence. They want the normal, like, American dream life. So there is a point of contention, yes, totally. I would also just say that's usually between generations, and it's also between persons who have, I don't know, like non-binary identities, so like queer, bisexual, pansexual, genderqueer, gender variant. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to the simulationist perspective. They're like, why are you messing everything up for me? Like, why can't you just be normal? Why can't you just shave your legs and have long hair? Why can't you just be a butch lesbian? Like, why do you have to? Does this make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I guess you touched on like the marriage equality, and for me, I am an advocate for marriage equality. Not to say that everyone who is LGBT should go and get married, but if you want to and you want to be afforded these legal rights and not be treated as almost subhuman, you should be allowed to have the same rights that your straight peers do.
Okay. But the thing is that I'm not necessarily against. Okay, well, I am against the institution of marriage. Let's just put it out there. I am. But the thing is that, like, I still respect people's, choice to get married if they want to. It's just the issue that I have with it is that there's so many rights, benefits, and privileges only allotted to a certain group of people, and I think that it should be opened up. It should be freed. Like, people can still get married, but do they need to, like, exclude a large amount of the population from, like, having access to that? No, I don't think so. I think that people should have access to health care. And I think that people should have access to, like, basic things that only married people have access to. Does that make sense? So, like, does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have, I guess, a different stance. I don't think, although I am for marriage equality, I don't think that you should have access to these certain rights through marriage. You should be able to have affordable health care, if not free health care. It's a basic right to be able to go to the doctor if you're sick and get treated. Things such as access to food. I mean, if you don't have two people working together in a household, sometimes it's hard to have access to food, things like transportation, to housing, and that's just not really acceptable.
In terms of the Grand Rapids scene, I mean, so Joe, you've been here most of your whole life,
Yes.
and Ben, you've been here for a few years. What's been your experiences with, off campus in Grand Rapids around whether or not, in terms of like, physical spaces that feel open and affirming or safe to you, sort of the general culture here, and then what, if any, interaction have you had with any of the, organizations or entities that, maybe are like the network or, the annual Pride event or any of those kinds of things? I mean, what's your experience with that in the city?
Sure. Well, where to start? Honestly, I feel like the only place that I have ever felt completely comfortable and safe isn't even in Grand Rapids. I would say it's at every queer conference I've gone to. Because there, I feel like people ask me what my preferred pronoun is. Like, I don't, like, it's right up there in the front. Like, people don't assume. In Grand Rapids, it's not the same. Like, people, you ask, what is your preferred pronoun? They're like, what's a pronoun? What are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? And then, I mean, the only things that you can do as, like, an LGBT person in Grand Rapids is go to the bar, which is a whole nother problem in of itself. And once I get there, like, it's often assumed that I'm a butch lesbian. And so, like, people treat me that way. And so if I do have a cis male partner, if I am dating a trans man, like, I do often receive negativity from it, negative responses from it. And, like, they don't really understand it. They think I'm a traitor. They think like, I'm just experimenting. Like, it's weird, abnormal, you know. And then the same with, like, I would say the network. I'm not really too familiar with the network, but what I do know of it is that it's older generations run it. There's really not a whole lot of programming for me. Like, I check their schedule of events, and they do have, like, a lesbian, like, I don't know if you know this, but they do have, like, I don't know what they're called, like, where you, like, sit in a circle and you, like, talk. What are those things called? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Like support groups?
Yeah.
Yeah, support groups. They have support groups of all, sit in a circle. They have, like, different support groups. So they have a lesbian support group, and they have, like, a youth support group, and they have a gay male and a trans one. Where do I fit in that? You know, like, where's, like, the gender variant? Like, I mean, oftentimes, like, if I do go to the trans, like, because technically genderqueer does fall under the transgender umbrella, but oftentimes, like, because I don't want to physically transition my body, I don't want to change my body, like, I am, again, seen as a traitor, seen as abnormal, weird, like, I'm not a real trans person. And, like, I don't want to, invade that space because, like, they need that space. Like, they already are, you know, they already don't have space and agency. And then if I go to the lesbian one and I talk about how I'm in a relationship with a straight cis man, like, they're going to question that too. So really, like, there's no space carved out for queer identities at all.
I found, this is surprising to a lot of people, that Grand Rapids is a lot more affirming than I had growing up. Most people always speak how conservative it is, but it was more conservative where I grew up, and so it was almost more liberating here. There's some great pockets in Grand Rapids that I totally feel comfortable being myself, such as in East Town or Heritage Hill or Cherry Hill, around those areas. And it's kind of sad that the only real meeting place for LGBT, especially youth, is at the bar. The fact that you have to go to a bar to meet friends, dates, etc., whereas the cis heterosexual lifestyle, you can go out to the mall, you can go to the grocery store, and you can go to a book club, you can meet people there that are surrounding you. The fact that you have to strictly go to a bar eliminates a lot of people who don't feel comfortable in that setting. I know for me, going to the gay bar is, I don't know, I get alienated in a different way because in the straight community, I get alienated for my femininity. At the bar, I would get alienated for my masculinity. Like, there's instances, I guess, I went to a drag show and they pick out a straight guy to kind of tease him and make him feel funny. And they picked me out and they wouldn't believe me that I was gay, which is kind of, I mean, why do I have to prove it to you? I don't know what you want me to do here. And those kind of things. And I know with the specifically gay community, there's a lot of like, I guess, sizeism, where I'm made to feel like my body isn't good enough, or I'm too big.
Where like every part of your body like has to be sculpted, like
And I guess just last week I was walking to the bar and some guy just told me like, "Oh, you're hot for a fat guy," which is like, why do you have to say anything at all? I mean, I don't know who you are. That's really rude.
I do remember once upon a time when there was a Discussions coffee shop. And I mean, that place was utilized by the queer youth. I mean, I went there in high school, totally. I went there for gay prom. Like, it was awesome. Yeah, it closed down a few years ago, unfortunately. I know why, but I'm a little sad about it. I just kind of wish that there were like more like gay-owned restaurants, queer-owned restaurants, and like coffee shops, more like LGBT culture, like flowing through here. I mean, like we do have like the once a year Pride Festival, but that's one day, and like it's like tucked away in Riverside Park. Like there's no march throughout Grand Rapids. Like there needs to be increased visibility. There needs to be more access and resources.
I know that there's like, I don't always go to the gay bars. I go to straight bars as well because I have a lot of straight friends. And so there's a lot of bars that are open and like affirming to me. I'll go dance with my straight guy friends at a straight bar, and I don't get anything for it. Like there's a lot of bars that are open, accepting, and like that kind of culture where it's acceptable but to be who you are, which is kind of great. I feel like a lot of the things are maybe moving away from the traditional gay bar, where this is the only space where you can feel open with who you are. But in the same note, that's kind of sad that some of those spaces are being taken away, or like they're not there anymore.
Well, maybe by wrapping up here, in terms of the future, you know, imagining that people are going to maybe watch, listen to this interview 10, 20, 30
why
years
would
from
they?
now, right? It's part of this continuum of sort of of how history unfolds. And regardless of what the reality will be 20 or 30 years from now, particularly for the LGBTQ community, I mean, maybe much bigger gains will be made, maybe not. Maybe there'll be taking steps back depending on the political climate and so forth. But what kind of a message, would you want to sort of impart on people, the next generation or generations, about what's important maybe to think about, or something that's really kind of helped you be resilient and, not give into sort of the dominant cultural norms about these things?
Never underestimate the importance of empathy. Empathy is a driving force. It's our soul power. I know it's changed my mind about different things. It's exposed me to new people, new things I didn't understand before, and taking away what I believed in my opinions for a second, just like listening to someone talk, like giving them space to tell me about their struggle, their pain, their joys, has changed my opinions. It's changed the way I look at life, and I feel like it's really important when you're talking to someone with a marginalized queer identity. It's just, don't make assumptions, just listen.
How am I supposed to top that? I guess, I don't know, I kind of see a future where gender identity and sexuality is irrelevant. You don't really think one thing if your son dates another man, or then the next week they break up and he dates a woman. You don't think that he's gay, straight, bi, whatever. You just think that he's your son. And it's not really seen as something crazy or taboo. it's just who you are.
And more importantly, you have to remember too that the LGBTQIA alphabet soup population, like we're not just queer. Like we're also like, you know, have different socioeconomic statuses. We also have, we're also part of like different marginalized, like racially marginalized communities.
Immigration status.
Yes, like the list goes on. And so like I don't stop being like queer when I go back home and like to my low income community. Like I'm those things simultaneously. Like I can't separate them. Like they're always going to be a part of who I am. And like I feel like oftentimes we try to like dichotomize, like separate these groups from each other, and you can't do that because everyone's unpacking their own different identities, if you know what I mean. Intersectionality. So I guess I'm kind of hoping that the movement moves more to being inclusive of those things, of social justice as a whole, which empathy comes back into play.
Absolutely. And that's sort of what Eckler's point about the tension. She's saying the liberation wasn't just in terms of their own identity, but that it was that struggle was a part of larger justice struggles.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you both for sharing your stories with us.
Thanks.